I was scrolling through TikTok the other day when I found something really interesting. Apparently only now are Brazilians finding out they're Latinos.
You know me. No, I don't!
Brothers and sisters are natural enemies, like Englishmen and Scots, or Welshmen and Scots, or Japanese and Scots.
If you're from outside Latin America, especially if you're from the US, you're probably looking at your screen like,
what the hell do you mean Brazilians are not Latinos? They come from Latin America, am I right?
well, geography is only one of the ways of thinking about this issue. And in reality, the vast majority of Brazilians disagree with being called Latinos.
A 2015 research has shown that only 4% of Brazilians living in Brazil identify as Latinos. And of course, most of them identify as Brazilians.
But why?
No conversation unlocks the complexity of the Hispanic versus Latino conversation more than Brazil.
Não tem a menor condição, o menor cabimento de você querer colocar o brasileiro como latino, porque não rola.
Porque muita gente se refere a pessoas hispanas aqui da América Latina como os latinos. Querido, você também é latino.
Welcome to Fruta Bomba. This is a space where we talk everything Latin America. I'm Caroline Coutinho, and if any of this sounds interesting to you, don't forget to subscribe. A lot of Brazilians would argue that Brazil is simply way too different from its neighbors. You have the language, of course, but then they would say stuff like, oh, we don't listen to reggaeton, we listen to funky, they dance to salsa, and we dance to lambada, etc., etc. But what does it mean to be Latino in the first place? There is a couple ways to think about it, but the most common one is to say, well, Latinos are anyone that were born in Latin America and speak a language that originates from Latin. But for many, that definition is at least incomplete.
Because if we think of Puerto Rico, for example, as Latinos, shouldn't we do the same for, let's say, Quebec in Canada? And wouldn't it also exclude people from Belize or Suriname just because they speak English and Dutch? It also excludes some indigenous communities that speak their native language, like Guarani. But should it?
Besides technicalities, a lot of people don't call themselves Latinos because of geography or linguistics, but simply because that's how people treat them, right? Because another way to think about identity is how others see you.
For example, a lot of today's Latino archetype was consolidated by American pop culture, movies like Westerns and what would become Latino music.
And then, of course, we have the news.
Yesterday, we talked about potentially shutting down the southern border, or 2 days ago.
And here is where we need to talk about US Latinos, because although they come from all over Latin America, they often can relate to one another. And if it's not in a cultural level, it's at least political, because they often suffer from the same harmful stereotypes. And here we include Brazilians. For example, back in 2018, this story made headlines in Brazil.
This case of xenophobia with a YouTuber will remind you that in the United States, Brazilians are Latinos.
Essa mulher aqui, ó, essa americana, ela tá criando barraco aqui no bar que a gente tá, achando que a gente não tem visto, que a gente é ilegal aqui nos Estados Unidos. Essa americana, ela tá achando.
Eduardo Galeano had a different way of seeing identity. He did not believe it had to do with how people feel in the present or how they did in the past.
For him, it was more like a political project. Latin America needed to create its own myths and appreciate the complexity of its own reality, so it could finally be free from other countries, especially those in Europe and the US. So for him, identity is a commitment that you make for you and for the community that you want to see in the future.
Y por cierto que la leyenda y el mito son también fuentes de conocimiento, porque han sido los medios de los que dispuso la memoria del vencido para no ser aniquilada.
The takeaway of this video is that there's no single answer to this question, because identity is not static. It's an individual decision that comes from your life choices, your culture, and your history, but that at the same time it's consolidated by others. And if you agree with Galeano, it's also a choice of what you want to see for you and for your community. And as a Brazilian myself, I'm just happy to be having this debate. But what do you think? Do you think Brazilians are Latinos? What does it mean to be Latino for you? Let me know. And of course, all my references are in the description down below. And if you like this video, I really appreciate if you can give it a like, and even more if you could subscribe. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Bye!